you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
This is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the earliest season that makes it official. Welcome to 16 years, 2,800 episodes of the Chris Voss Show, bringing you one of the oldest podcasts still broadcasting, and all the wonderful guests that we bring on this show that help uplift your life and make your world better. So there, we're going to get into it. As always, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Facebook.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. We had an amazing young gentleman on the show. We're going to be talking about his book, his insights, and his experience. His book is entitled Unshackling the Truth, Triumph. Let me recut that. Unshackling the Truth, Triumphant Over Injustice, out August 1st, 2024 by Keith Tyrone Bush. We're going to get into it with him and find out more about what this book is about. Unshackling the Truth is a story of resilience, transformation, and exoneration after police brutality, prosecutorial misconduct, and the lack of accountability. This is a story of about an innocent man who spent 44 years of his life under the control of the criminal justice system for a crime he did not commit. Despite facing immense adversity, Keith's unwavering determination to be free and foundational approach to self-empowerment now serves as a beacon of inspiration for all those who seek to overcome challenges while embracing personal growth. Welcome to the show, Keith. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Chris, for having me.
Thank you for coming. We certainly appreciate it. It's an honor to have you. Give us your .coms, website, social media, wherever you want people to find you on the interwebs.
I'm on the TikTok once in a while. I go on TikTok. Yes, K Bush 57.
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't do too much of the social media, but once in a while I go on.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild era there with the social media, huh?
I mean, there's a lot of good information out there, so I use it for that purpose.
Me, I just doom scroll. So the world's gonna end. You know, that sort of thing. Keith, give us an overview on the facts of the case or what's in the book.
Okay, really, the book it starts off with a tragedy. A young girl who had been violently, viciously, and diabolically murdered attending a party. And the sad part about it is that the crime was so heinous that it literally sent shockwaves, not only in our community, but shockwaves throughout this nation. And worse than that, this book speaks about why her death went in vain because of the investigative process involved. They had failed to give her justice by properly investigating this case and properly prosecuting this case. They had disrespected her family. They had disrespected my community and so many other who depend on law enforcement and the prosecution to carry out justice in a crime, particularly of this nature. This book highlights two victims. She is the ultimate victim in this tragedy. This book also talks about another victim, which is myself. I've been a victim of this system for 44 something years, not because someone made a mistake. They had good intentions and bad investigation may have led them down the wrong road and they may have made some errors. You know, you can't really hold them accountable for. This conviction was the result of them throwing this case on top of me. They literally kidnapped me. They deceived and tricked me in their possession, held me for over 11 hours before they were able to force me physically to sign a statement incriminating myself in this case. They arrested me and they kept me in the county jail for 18 months before they tried me. And the fact of the matter is that within 5 months after they did what they did to me, they were confronted with another serious situation where someone had placed themselves at the scene of this crime and has left evidence. And instead of bringing forth justice and exposing this information as exculpatory evidence, they decided to conceal it. They decided to hide it and just throw the case on me. And as a result of that, there were a lot of other players throughout that period that were participatory players in concealing the conviction up to 44 something years.
44 years. Wow. Do you feel that there was a maliciousness to conceal it, or was it laziness, or was it racism? What do you think was the reason behind hiding that evidence?
If you look at, like, when you read the book, there's clear evidence of racism in the book just by the comments made by the detectives. The leading detectives, one of them had made reference to homicides in the Black community as misdemeanor homicides. And that's exactly the way they treated this case, like it was a misdemeanor, insignificant homicide.
Wow.
In spite of what happened to this young girl. This man had also, even after they concealed this information, we were able to uncover this information. He had confided to investigators with reference to me that he told them that, yeah, he remembered that nigger Bush, and that they should have executed him for this crime.
Wow.
But we understand just from the history of Suffolk County law enforcement and the things that they were involved with, particularly at that time, that they were engaged with a lot of racial discrimination in these predominantly Black communities, but it wasn't all about racism. There were many people who were victimized by law enforcement in Suffolk County that was Black, Latino, white, matter. And that's what led to some of the biggest investigations in the country about law enforcement that occurred right there in that particular county.
Wow. That is sad and unfortunate. Lay the foundation for this. What time does this take place here, and how old are you? What are you doing? You know, what's going on in your life as you're first approached by the police, and where does it go from there?
You know, this was a party. This was in North Bellport, New York, Long Island, New York. This party occurred in 1975, January 10th, 1975. It was a teenage party. We had people from ages, 14 up to 20, some a few older. People coming and going throughout the night. It was over maybe close to 100 people that could have attended that party. And the deceased also attended the party. I knew the deceased. I spoke with her on a few occasions. Yeah, business as usual, interactions, introducing the people, and just, that type of stuff. But after I left the party, her mother had came looking for her the next day. She was trying to find people that, I spoke with her and knew her. And they had stopped by my house and asked me about it. I said, yeah, I spoke to her, but I didn't see her leave with anybody. I seen her leave out the door, but I didn't see her leave with anybody. And I don't know if she actually left then or she actually came back. But anyway, after a few days, she didn't return home. So there was a hunt. Everybody was looking, asking people, trying to find out where she were. And according to police, they alleged that someone had gave them a statement after they found the body that they seen the deceased walk out the house with me and walk down the street with me, and she became a prime suspect. I mean, wow. She made me a suspect in the case. They needed to speak to me again. Instead of coming to my house to speak to me, they had some friends get me out of school, used false pretense and deception by telling me one thing, and they got me into the police precinct. And then when my friends came back to try to locate me, they kept telling them that I wasn't there. So they had essentially placed me incommunicado, and then they shipped me off to the head precinct.
And how old are you at this time?
I'm 17 years old.
Wow.
17. I've never been involved in the criminal justice system, so I have no idea about, what goes on there. You're raised to believe that you believe in your authorities, and you follow those basic concepts of decency. You do what you have to do. Obviously, there are other realities and situations that you live in that you have to, do whatever you have to do to survive. So these are the elements that make us up. I was a product of that. And as a young man, I had no idea that the police would do what they did to me. But after they had done that to me, it basically, it traumatized me. And as a result of that, I had to go through a number of transformations. I had to go through a number of different stages of realization and ways to deal with, the harsh mistreatment of being abused by the criminal justice system, and then being placed in a cage and being sent there to die.
Yeah. Did they give you the death penalty, or?
They gave me life. I had a life sentence. They gave me 20-year consideration. So at 20 years, they would consider, if I was eligible for parole. They gave parole the power to determine if I could be released at any time that they think it was suitable. They gave me a 20-year sentence with life imprisonment, a 4-year sentence to run concurrent. And, I did 20 years. After I did the first 20 years, I ended up doing an additional 12 years. One of the requirements for parole is you had to admit to guilt. And because I refused to admit to guilt, then the parole board, obviously, they chose that they would not entertain my freedom. And they did up until the time when I was released.
How do you square this? I ask a lot of people on the show that have unique experiences like yourself that a lot of people don't get to experience. How do you process this and deal with it? What was maybe the journey that you went through of, first realizing that, you're taken off the streets and then you're thrown into prison for basically life. And how did you process it throughout that thing?
For me, processing begins mentally. I had to go through first some mental stages before I could make sense of the reality that I was confronted. And one was with shame, pain, hurt, anger. These things, they grow on you, man, because of what was done to you, the situation you find yourself in. And these things, they're like entities. They want your seat of power. They want to be able to drive, their experience through you in the situation that you find yourself in. And I went through that. I fell to some of them things, going through the pain of this after realizing what they said I did and how it affected me. And just the fact that now, I'm angry about, somebody putting their hands on me, and now they done threw the whole crime on me. And it's like they done painted me as this demon that they done projected to the world so that people would grow to hate me and think that I was this cowardly, demonic individual that would do something like that. You go through these things, and these things are, they're wrestling for the right to own you, know. And through that transformation, I had to come to certain realizations, and a lot of it came through my own personal self-studies. You start educating yourself, you start raising questions about things. And I had got to the point where I had to make psychological changes because, the anger was eating me up, the frustration, closing the doors. They eat at you, like a cancer, it just eats you up. I had to reevaluate things. And one of the things I had done that I thought was very keystone for me was a full mental detoxification.
Oh, really?
I was. And by that, I mean that I had to question everything that defined me as a person. I grew up, I grew up in the Black community. I'm Black. I'm a product of a Black experience. There are certain things that we couldn't do. And these things I had to take all that off. I had to take off what I believed in. I had to take off this concept of whether, you let's say if you're a Democrat or Republican or Christian or Muslim, I had to take all that off just to find out who I was. It was at that stage where I began the rebuilding process. The book outlines some of those processes.
Oh, really?
Unfolded, throughout the time of my incarceration. So you will see me in different stages, whether I'm studying certain things about creating my own reality or having a hand in taking the initiative, as opposed to hoping and praying for, a righteous judge to come forward and do what's right. I had to take some of these initiatives on my own. For me, the process, it begun with me being able to at least start from the starting point and then build that character up to the person that I became today.
That's really hard, to tear yourself down and then look at yourself and then try and rebuild who you are. And I imagine some of what you had to rebuild had to be survival based, because, prison is a day by day, it's a survival arena, really, when it comes down to it. You can be killed, you can be attacked, there's things that can happen in there. There's all sorts of different personalities and people, and some are, maybe not bad, and some are really bad. And so you're confronted with that on a daily basis, right?
Prison is exactly a microcosm of the outside world. Everything that you experience in there, you will experience in there. You're going to have people that are striving on a positive path, trying to do something for themselves. There are people that, they made reconciliation with themselves. They're trying to find the Lord. You have some people that they're gang oriented. Some people are robbing people. Some people are, so the things that you see out in this society, you see it there, because they're just reflections they're a mirror of each other. But for me, the objective was clear. If I didn't find a way to free myself, I would die in a cage. And so I'm not really concerned about the lifestyle that prison offers. I know where I need to be and what I need to do to get there. Fall, you get up, you fall, you get up. At some point, you learn. Mm-hmm. And in that learning process, it was clear to me that I needed to be on this path. And if there's anybody that's on that path that's trying to move me off, then I'm going to have to accept that challenge when it gets there. Yeah. I'm determined to get what I want out of it.
Did you? I imagine you had a public defender, right?
I had a public defender. We had a private attorney that tried to.
Oh, really?
It was Simon and Simon. It was they were actually one of the top lawyers on Long Island. And, obviously my family, they came together and they did what they can. And, I was a young boy, they helped me get a lawyer. And, so we had a good lawyer, but we had a crooked system. Yeah. We had a crooked system where everything goes. And in that system, it didn't matter who you had. It got to the point where the system was so bad that they started trying to intimidate a judge, that led to a commission of investigation of Suffolk County. Wow. Just as a result of that. And the main detectives that sparked the investigations were the main detectives in my case.
Wow.
These are the ones who walked away with pensions at the highest in the country for what they did in this case, and all the things they did to other people. Some people who've also been exonerated, all the things they've done to them, they walked away with, even though they compensated some people for these damages, they're still sitting on the highest pensions in the country.
Wow.
There's no accountability for this stuff.
Yeah. That is interesting to me. We were talking in the pre-show about how, you received a payoff for the damages against you. Do you feel that, I think it was like 16 million, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you feel that can justify or pay? How do you feel about that? Can that justify losing 44 years of your life?
I never fought for money. I never even imagined. Yeah. That never even really entered my mind.
Freedom was probably worth more, huh?
I was insulted. You put your hands on me. You threw a crime on me that I didn't do. Then when you found out that you really made a mistake, instead of coming forward and doing what just people do, you did what demons do. You do what devils do. You turned around and you threw it on me. Mm-hmm. Then in every facet of the system I entered into, whether it's corrections, whether it's parole, that you're jumping on me because I won't submit to you. Like submission is the will, of the day. That if you don't submit, then, so I didn't care about no money. I cared about what they did to me. And the reason why they were able to do it to me is because they've been doing it for so long and they have never been put in check, even though they've been investigated by so many other people, whether it's the commission, whether it's the governor, whether it's the circuit courts, whether it's the bar associations and experts around the country raising questions about these numbers being too high. It doesn't matter. What really mattered is that they didn't care about me. So for me, it was war.
So there really wasn't anyone really held accountable for it that was the initial propagators of this then?
No, there was not. The prosecutor had died. There was the two detectives that were the main detectives in this case were still alive. And, like I said, after they exonerated me and apologized and compensated me, they continue to, this county pays me. The county also pays the person responsible for having to pay me. So they're paying twice.
Wow. That is just wild. What kept you going through those times? Was there a book? Some people turn to the Bible. Some people turn to some sort of stoicism or inspiring tome that might, help keep you have hope. I mean, I imagine you maintained hope through this whole process and all these years.
What really kept me going is after that, I got to the point where I wanted to fight. I wanted to fight this system. I had got involved in any type of efforts against the criminal justice system. I was involved in it because I felt like this system was an oppressor to me. And I'm looking at my personal experience. And then I had another thing that kept me going too is I had to come to terms with myself, and I began to read. And one of the things I read some stuff on. I read some stuff on the Seth material. I read some stuff on the Hermetic philosophies. I'm reading, and then I'm reading some cultural stuff because I got guys in the prison system, and I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding about most prisoners is that they look at these guys as if they're, they're treacherous, they're demons and all the other stuff. And some of them have committed some very, very harsh crimes. Come to learn that you can't separate the good from the bad. There's no such thing. That's a social indoctrination. You are a product, you are a manifestation of what you carry out. That's who you become. But you have that power to choose and to decide. And make those decisions, they're accountable for their actions. And that's why they end up there. But some of these men were very intelligent. Some of these men were my teachers, and they passed on information. And the stuff that I aspired to wasn't the stuff that was really pushing me to become a part of somebody, but was to challenge me to believe in myself and to believe that, that these belief systems they're designed for control. As I began to study, the more I learned, the more I realized that I was asleep. And so was so many millions of others. They have been actually put to sleep with lies. And when I started to see the truth, then I was able to turn my cage into a cave. And believe me, I did a lot of my work inside that cage, late at night when most people were asleep. I was there studying, reading, and preparing and executing.
Did you? What was the proponent that started this process of re-looking at the evidence? Had you been fighting it legally this whole time, or? Go ahead.
Oh, excuse me. What I did is we proceeded with a direct appeal. I went through the appeal process.
And when was that?
And that was in 1980. I had 1980s, the Second Circuit of New York State. They sent my case back down to the county court for a hearing based on an issue of probable cause. It's a new case that came out in the United States Supreme Court about deception on minors and all that stuff. And the case had fit my case like a tailor suit. So I didn't think they would want that case to go into this it would have never made it to the Supreme Court. The higher courts would have probably threw it out. But anyway, they sent me back to determine a probable cause hearing. And the prosecution's star witness, the one who claimed that she seen me leave the party with the victim, she came forward and she admitted that she lied.
Wow.
So she recanted her testimony. They threatened her, we can put you in jail for perjury, and she testified she can't take it no more. She tried to commit suicide. She had lost her baby. She had a baby boy at the time. She was on trial. She was pregnant, and 6 months after her baby boy died. So she felt like God was punishing her for what she did to me. And, these are things that's working on her psyche. And so anyway, she recants. But the trial judge, they deny it. They deny the hearing. They denied the recantation. The appellate division, they denied the motion. The circuit, the department denied it. Then the appellate division denied the motion. Now I'm left to go to the federal courts. I go to the federal courts. I got a mixed petition. I got to redo that. So I do a collateral attack. I correct the mixed petition. And then I'm in the federal court. They deny it. Then I do some collateral information. I find new information because now I'm learning the powers of objectivity. I'm stepping outside the prison walls now. I'm going to use the pen as my vehicle. I'm making connections and I'm finding out things. And so now I get new evidence. I'm back in court. I'm in court with that. They're denying that. Now they're denying just about everything. Now, at one point, I'm looking, I got 10, 12 years in, and everything is gone. So now when they take, they deny everything, now you have to start where? You have to find another way. So I began to search other ways, and I was able to get some people involved. I got Innocent Project involved, the Centurion Ministry in New Jersey. They had got involved with my case and was working for a number of years with me with it. But there were too many roadblocks. They refused to let us talk to the medical examiner. And
Really?
There was roadblocks like crazy. And I knew that they were hiding something. They were hiding something because one thing I learned when you're trying to address something, that you cover everything, try to, wherever there's a lead, explore it. And I was aware of the fact that they had hidden, someone had told my mother, she said, listen, your son is innocent. Don't always, keep fighting, because, I'm not at liberty of talking about the case, but just tell him, just keep fighting. But, when she first told me that, I knew something was wrong, because I always felt that they were hiding something. So anyway, I did on 1989, I did a FOIA request to the district attorney asking for complete files, everything, all known, unknown, everything you got. If they'd have sent that information to me at the time that I made that request, then in 1989, I would have got exonerated.
Wow.
But instead, they sent me everything but that. And then the district attorney who was ahead of it, who's now a judge, Henley, he's a judge. Then in these other collateral attacks, these other district attorneys that was pushing back on my case and all that, some of them are judges now. The one that really got Tom Spoto, the one that got convicted, right? Once he got convicted, that opened the doorway for my exoneration, because he was pushing back on my conviction for 12 years, even after I had DNA evidence that proved that I didn't commit the crime.
DNA too? Wow.
They denied the motion and pushed back on my conviction. But this is the same guy was the right-hand man to the district attorney who did that file stuff to me in 1975.
Really? Wow.
They're playing these same games for decades.
Wow.
Taking each other's back. He went out and became a private lawyer, and then got some of these other lawyers out of the district attorney and all that, and formed the dream team on Long Island, where they were actually representing judges and politicians and police officers, and with the one hand in the district attorney's office, they in the other hand as attorneys representing them, getting them off cases. This culture, this practice was so bad, it was so terrible that it took one man, Tim Sini, who be after this district attorney, Tim Spoto, when he fell, he got arrested and he got convicted. And when he came aboard, he promised to clean up the county, and he was going to do some things. He had implemented that conviction review board and all the other stuff. That's how they took on my case after we had put all the facts of our case together.
Wow.
And presented it to them.
Yeah. And I mean, this must have been frustrating to constantly have, think maybe there's some progress in here. You've maybe got some evidence that, the testimony against you was erroneous, but still you can't get free of the system. It just keeps sucking you back in, to quote Godfather 2.
Yeah. When you look at this case, not only did the district attorney and the two detectives that were involved in this case were sitting there trying to figure out how they're going to manipulate this new evidence of someone who put themselves at the crime scene. But you had the medical doctor, you had the detective in serology. They're testifying, giving opinions, scientific opinions about situations that can't be factuated, that has no database from which to draw from. So when you look at how all these players actually participated, then you can actually see that not only the district attorney and police officers, but medical examiners and other expert witnesses and all of them was also given erroneous testimonies to render convictions.
Wow.
But the sad part is, I'm not the only one it happened to. Bless you. I'm not the only one it happened to. It happened to many people on Long Island. There's a lot of cases like this. There's a lot of cases around the country where this type of practice, misinformation, tampering with evidence, confessions, and all this other stuff is universally applied, particularly in the Black communities.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you hope? What did it feel like to be exonerated and get your day in court and be freed? What did that feel like?
I mean, there's always it feels like
bittersweet, maybe.
It's better than bittersweet. It feels like you've been carrying a mountain on your shoulder, for so long that people think you have a hunchback, and once you push that mountain off, and you just feel a sense of relief. But I'm also aware of the fact that, in many ways, I hit the lotto. There are guys that's in the prison system. There are women in the prison system that are being exonerated all the time now.
Wow. Yeah.
Thanks to things like DNA testing and more so thanks to righteous individuals who have the courage to stand up and right or wrong when they see it and not go with the grain. Mm-hmm. One of the problems in my case, there were people that could have stopped this many years ago, but everybody went with the grain. If they would have stepped forward and did something different, then that would have happened.
What was the motivation to publish the book and share your story?
I didn't know if I was going to die in prison. I got to the point where you exhaust all your remedies, you explode all your avenues, and now you gotta keep looking and looking. But it was important for me, the way they painted me, the way they defined me, and the way they treated me, the way they treated the deceased, the way they treated her family, my community. It was important for me to tell this story. And I had to tell this story out of my own mouth. You may have read the newspapers, you may have seen some of the clippings, or you may have heard some of the other people, but I have to tell you this story out of my mouth. And I try to lean on that avenue that inspires people. I don't care what your situation is. You don't have to be in prison for a day or a moment. You can be in prison mentally because you're in a state of confusion and you just can't find your way through, and you're trapped there. But, you have to make that initiative because you've been born to be built like that, because these are your training grounds. And, I had to at least let people know that irregardless to what you're going through, that, you know, you can persevere. It's not guaranteed, but when you put your best effort forward, you can live with that. But more importantly, that at some point, America is going to have to take a detoxification of all these systems that defined us and find out what it is do we want for America and what do we want for the people of America. You know? And that boils down to the question of accountability.
Yeah.
And for me, I just wanted to say in that book that, you know, in spite of all that, people are not being held accountable for what they do. So when you have the rich and the poor, you know, for the rich, you know, their inherited glory, it sits on their wealth and power and fame. But for the poor, prison awaits, you know, usually with death and suffering.
Yeah.
And people have to make that decision on, what type of world do they want to live in? Because when you live in a world where there's no accountability, then you're living in a world of chaos.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there should be more remedy for making sure these things don't happen in the first place, but also cleaning up police departments of racism and different things. I mean, it seems like that body seems to sometimes attract people that aren't of the highest order of ethics. You know, we're seeing that in our ICE police right now in 2026, where they're circumventing the ethics and morals, even the amendments to the Constitution to fit their narrative of what they want to take and do. And this is where injustice usually happens. And yeah, I mean, it's quite the experience they went through, and people should definitely read the book and realize the depth of it and how important it is that we make sure these things don't happen. As we go out, give us your final pitch out for people to order up the book and find out more about you and your story.
As far as the book is concerned, you can get the book at Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. You know, it's my version. You know, it's my experience, and I hope that it, you know, can inspire, you know, people to accept their own challenges, whatever it is in life. But more importantly, to know yourself, to educate yourself and to realize that you are, you know, you're the one that's creating the world, you know, each one of you, each at a time. But as an individual, without you, the world is really not the same. It's slightly different. You know, so you are a player, you know, in this world, and you get a chance to play righteously or unrighteously. But there should always be accountability.
Wow. There should always be. And, you know, it's sad that you go to jail, but the people who falsify this crime against you don't. And they're still getting paid, as you mentioned, the pensions. Give us your .com as we go out, or websites, wherever you want people to find you on the internet.
Usually people send things to my email, keitbus5757@yahoo.com. I usually do a lot of things through the email.
Did they ever find her killer?
There's a section in the book. The problem is that they would have found her killer if they would have done their job.
They would have done the job, yeah.
But by not doing it, this guy went on to, you know, he committed other crimes. He impregnated an underage girl.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, he did all types of violent and wild stuff. But that's because obviously they didn't do the job that they.
Wow. So other people had to.
There's a section in the book I refer to who killed, you know, Sharice. And what I did is through all the investigation I'd done throughout my years and all the leads and avenues, some were contradictory or whatever, I laid out the whole scenario of what came out of that investigation, and I left it up to the reader to decide.
So many people victimized all over a lie. It's crazy. Thank you, Keith, for coming to the show. We really appreciate it. What an amazing story. I mean, we have a lot of stories on this show about people who go through cathartic moments and they survive. But 44 years, those are some of the best years of your life that are irreplaceable and probably invaluable, really. And thank you for sharing your story with us, sir. Yeah,
you're welcome. And Chris, these are the best years of my life.
I mean, every day. That's what I try and remind myself. I think we all look at sometimes our past and go, "I wish that hadn't happened." But
I keep finding myself in the moment.
Yeah,
but these are my best years.
Man, every day, I mean, you can't change the past. All you can do is to really impact for the future by what you do right now in this moment. And thank you for sharing your story, Keith. Folks, order up his book wherever fine books are sold, Unshackling the Truth, Triumphant Over Injustice, out August 1st, 2024. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTok, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.
All right, Keith.